So today's agenda will entail the following items. I'll talk through each of these categories and discuss examples of how these can benefit your organization as you grow and need to accommodate more streamlined and efficient processes with less maintenance. And again, at the end of the presentation, I will stop the recording and open up the session for Q&A from the attendees. Our first topic is approval processes. Approval processes are a great solution and one of the simplest ways to maintain or simplest ways to scale within the application. More often than not, I recommend that approval processes are leveraged because the moment you decide to change things up and insert any level of a secondary approver or even a change, you'll have the option to change these within the approval process in which you change it just once and not individually at each project, which certainly could be a high number. So you'll change that one time behind the scenes, and all of the projects will be updated at once by virtue of that global change. Approval processes are available for several items and have a number of options for meta values, including additional approvers to be added, and I'll go into that as well. As an added bonus, approval processes allow you the ability to set auto-approve rules. For example, auto-approvals from someone in finance if the expense amount is under a certain threshold, or requiring additional timesheet approval if the timesheet hours are over or under a certain number. Approvals can also be escalated to a subsequent approver if not approved within a defined number of days. Approval processes and additional project approvers are enabled within the administration module under administration and approval options. So once you're on the global settings, there is an option for approval options. I believe it's in the first column, if I'm not mistaken, within the application module. And this is what each of those checkboxes look like within that module. And again, so here you have the ability to select the additional project approvers. That one is here, which I'll talk about in just a moment, the additional fields, or you can enable approvals for invoices, for timesheets, for bookings or booking requests, depending on your workflow and modules in use. The additional project-specific approvers option will open up 3 new fields on the project properties form where additional project approvers can be defined. Those not needed, say if you only need 1 additional project approver, can be hidden via the form permissions. Additional project-specific approvers can be named users or meta values, such as manager or manager's manager, for example, or you can name Susie or Johnny or whoever your particular user is. And they allow for a wider array of configuration in the approval processes and flexibility in meeting your process needs. If and when a project approver changes or the order in which they approve various items change, then the change is a matter of navigating to the approval process within the administration module and using a drop-down menu and clicking Save. It's as simple as that, either reordering or adding in new or changing up the approvers. And again, so long as that approver is defined at the project level as an approval process. So what that looks like here, you can see in this drop-down, this is just a screenshot, but in this drop-down, it'll say whether it's approval process or you'll have the person's actual name. So long as you've got that, it's a one and done. Configuration of the approval processes, again, is under the administration application settings, and I tend to go to expense settings because it's the first one. The only reason I go there to expense settings rather than to resources, for example, if I'm setting up a booking approval, is that it doesn't matter which module the approval processes are set up from or accessed from. They're all set up in the same place, and then they're selected in their respective drop-downs at the project level on the properties form. Again, setup, as stated earlier, is simple and straightforward. It's a matter of selecting names or the meta values, the ability to identify more than one approver at a certain level. For example, Mary or John is done by assigning them the same sequence number on the far left, and then checking the box at the bottom to indicate that a sequence number requires only one approval. And then here is where the auto-approve rules can be set up as well on the right-hand side, where you can put in certain numbers for expenses or timesheet hours, for example. Assignment groups. Assignment groups are another great way to bulk select several users at once. Assignment groups are specific to both project task assignments and when sharing reports. At the base level, these assignment groups are all set up in the administration module under application settings and then project settings. Here, you can set up the shell of an assignment group, for example, all employees, or you can set up specific groups as per your needs. Say you wanted to set up a group called OpenAir Consultants or Development Team. Adding users to the assignment groups is where the variation can be. You can manually select new users to add to each group, as in the example of specific departments or teams, which by default has more controls in place since the users are specifically selected for that group. Additionally, you can set up an assignment group such as all employees, and rather than manually adding each new user to that group, there is an internal switch that you can request to be enabled, and it will automatically assign new employees to a designated group. That checkbox will be at the assignment group level, and it'll say something along the lines of add new employees to this group, so you don't have to remember. That, again, is beneficial when sharing a report with all OpenAir users, or when setting up a project where all users should be assigned to either the project or the task, and you've got that assignment group already there and everyone is in it. When using the assignment groups for specific teams or departments, a process should be defined where a set person or persons are responsible for updating the groups so that new members to that team or department are added and users who are no longer a part of that team or group are removed. And when setting up task assignments using the assignment groups, all the users will have the same percentage or planned hours at that task level. When using assignment groups for reports, those will be listed at the bottom of the user list and will indicate assignment group in brackets. Both of these are significant time savers when there's a need to select several users over and over. It's certainly not fun to select the same 6 or 10 or however many users you need to select. When sharing a report, for example, being able to select here in my example, the US assignment group saves a significant amount of time. Generic resources. Generic resources are a great way to set a placeholder so as to not tie up a specific user, or if a specific user is unknown, and prevent that user, if you do have a named user, known from being booked to live or current projects. Generic resources can be set up as generic or specific as you need, and then with bulk actions enabled for the bookings, they're very easy to swap out for named users. Generic resources are set up in the administration module, again, under application and resource settings. Again, the use of generics for resource planning can be configured in various ways. Generics can represent types of users needed for resource planning, as in the instance of consultant versus OpenAir consultant, or any other skill-based generic. And you can set up as many of these as you need to. If you need to or would like to include generic resources in your revenue planning, for example, you can assign an hourly rate as well. Modules and areas where generic resources are used are seen in a few different places. Within the resources module, or with the bookings, booking a generic resource to a project and task if necessary, if that's enabled, will allow you to build out models which allow you to see openings for actual users. Within the projects module, the task list or those task assignments. So assigning a generic resource to a task functions in a similar style to the bookings. Much of it depends on your usage and reporting based on those, whichever you're reporting from. And if using the generics on task assignments as well as bookings, there is functionality. It's an internal switch and process that would certainly need to be tested by your team to determine the appropriateness. But there's functionality that can be enabled to automatically create bookings from all of the generic task assignments. And then in reports, here in this example, I am showing an example of generics who are named after a specific time frame and are shown in a revenue versus capacity report and the potential gain or loss in work based on when they start and where they'd fit in. This is a very small snapshot of that report, but it shows me that for January, I could, if I have my new hire June, starting then I could be making $29,000 from that person. And lastly, but certainly not least, are scripting and integrations to help with growth and scaling. When the going get tough, the tough get automating. Both of these topics are so robust and could easily be their own standalone session. I'll talk about a couple different examples here with each of these. Scripts can and have proven to be a very powerful addition to OpenAir. Think logic. When something needs to happen that cannot otherwise be done via the UI or native functionality in OpenAir, that's where scripting steps in. For companies who have a large number of projects, for example, moving into a closed stage, which also might have a large number of open tasks remaining, a script such as the project closer one will free up manual time of closing each task by closing all of those tasks automatically once it hits the close stage and deactivating all billing and recognition rules and marking the project as active. So it saves that time in the manual checking, hitting the save button, and waiting for that refresh. If you have a process where you keep track of the project team on the properties page, perhaps populating those users onto the task assignments would be too time-consuming for someone who could otherwise be focusing on the company or team operations, and a script to populate those names make great sense. And all of these are examples of scripts that we have created for various folks. Scripts act in a logical way and really to insert a helping hand to expedite some tasks and make other tasks or even calculations possible that can't otherwise be generated from a custom calculation or a custom field. Integrations with outside systems is another great way to automate the data entry that often falls onto either an administrator or assistant, such as project or user creation. By defining logic in your CRM system, for example, new projects can be pushed through based on a particular sales stage. Maybe it's closed one, and then they're able to populate most, if not all, of your required fields. And I say that with the caveat if you've got a bunch of custom fields, depending on where the mappings need to go. And they can put your project in the landing stage for further evaluation by the team when it's ready to initiate. So maybe pending or even closed one stage where those would sit until someone takes action, says, okay, we're ready to start and start staffing this project. Another integration that we've built that's a great way to save the data entry time are new users. Those can be created from an HR system, and as we've done in past situations, the users are created, but they're left inactive so as to not use up a license if they're not ultimately needed, and then they're activated when the time is ready, and any necessary fields that require a person to review or update, especially based on your process, are done so at the time of activation. And the time savings from all kinds of integrations can be significant and, again, free up staff to focus on operational growth rather than pounding their fingers on the keyboard. So in summary, OpenAir is a very powerful tool and has the ability to accommodate growth through both automation and bulk configurations. Spending time discussing your process and determining where there are potential inefficiencies or areas more time is spent than may be necessary are certainly discussion points and starting points for those talks internally. Smaller changes often can sometimes make a very large impact, and each and every area is definitely worth looking into.